This is an advertisement by BetterHelp. January arrives with a sense of expectation and change. But real change is rarely loud or dramatic.
It's noticing what no longer needs to be there. Thoughts you keep turning over even when they're not helping.
And when you live with those long enough, they can start to feel normal until you pause and see them more clearly. That's where perspective helps. Not fixing yourself, just creating space to understand what's been weighing you down.
Therapy can offer that space, a clearer view of your own patterns and what's worth holding on to. BetterHelp makes starting straightforward. You answer a few questions and they match you with a qualified therapist. If it doesn't feel right, you can switch at any time.
Whether you're into New Year's resolutions or not, working to better yourself is something everyone should do. And you don't even need to bulldoze your life to do it. Simply use BetterHelp.
BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/restishistory. That's betterhelp.com/restishistory.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Car shopping shouldn't feel like preparing for a marathon of paperwork. That's why Carvana makes buying and financing your car easy. From start to finish, search thousands of vehicles with great prices. All online, all on your time. And when you're ready, your new car shows up right at your door. It doesn't get better than that. Buy your car the easy way. On Carvana. Delivery fees may apply.
January the 10th, the 705th year since the foundation of Rome, the 49th before the birth of Christ. The sun had long set behind the Apennine Mountains. Lined up in full marching order, soldiers from the 13th Legion stood massed in the dark. Bitter the night may have been, but they were well used to extremes. For 8 years they had been following the governor of Gaul on campaign after bloody campaign, through snow, through summer heat, to the margins of the world. And now, returned from the barbarous wilds of the north, they found themselves poised on a very different frontier. Ahead of them flowed a narrow stream. And Tom Holland, if that very purple prose hasn't sent you to sleep, what was the name of that stream, pray tell?
Dominic, the name of that narrow stream was the Rubicon.
And who wrote those extraordinary lines, Tom?
Dominic, 'twas I.
It was. So that's the beginning of Tom's book, Rubicon. So that's the book that launched you as a historian, isn't it?
Yes, it's the first work of history that I wrote. So in a way, my career as a historian
owes everything
begins
to those lines.
With those lines.
Extraordinarily, you're still working in history. And here we are.
Astonishing. Here we are going back to it.
And so we did the 12 days of Christmas over the festive season. And we were talking about anniversaries. And this is another anniversary, isn't it? Because January the 10th. Did it really happen on January the 10th, Tom?
Well, as with everything in ancient history, it's complex. I mean, this is the traditional date. It may have been a couple of days later, and it's further complicated by the incredible difficulty of mapping the Republican era dates onto our contemporary calendar. So by some reckonings, it may have been in late November, which
oh dear.
Really,
that's disappointing.
But let's just scrub that. So the 10th of January, Julius Caesar crosses the Rubicon, and it is, I think, one of the great moments in world history. It's a moment of incredible drama, and the measure of that is that really, I think, ever since 17th century, maybe even 16th century, in English, the phrase "to cross the Rubicon" has meant to take an irreversible decision. And the reason that it has that resonance is that Caesar, standing on the Rubicon, it is facing what the Romans called a discrimen. It's a moment of excruciating tension that is also a kind of dividing line in his career, because what he essentially has to decide is, does he stand down his command? He's been governor of Gaul for almost 10 years. Does he have to lay down his command, go back to Rome, and risk prosecution and potentially the ruin of his career? Or does he stay at the head of his legions and cross the Rubicon, which is the river marks the boundary between his provinces of Gaul and Italy itself?
Yeah.
And for him to cross that river, let alone at the head of his legions, is essentially to declare civil war.
Okay.
So the decision could not be more massive.
So before we get into the decision, set the scene for us very, very broadly. We're in the Roman Republic.
Yeah.
In the 1st century BC.
Yeah.
So Rome is not yet an empire in name, but it kind of is an empire in fact, isn't it? I mean, it's acquired all this territory in sort of Asia and North Africa and so on. And the Republican system. So the picture you paint in your book, which has so many kind of contemporary resonances, doesn't it, with the kind of the American Republic and so on. The picture you paint in your book is of this extraordinary city, kind of smoky, brick, disputatious, crowded, slum-infested city that has risen through military might to become the master of the Mediterranean. And it's sending out generals to the provinces and to the frontiers, commanding these armies who are increasingly unwilling to basically obey the conventions of the political. Is that a fair summary?
Essentially, yes. Essentially. I mean, the essence of the Republican system in Rome, it's founded, again, a bit like the American Republic, it's founded with the expulsion of the monarchy. And so the ideal in the Roman Republic, and Republic comes from res publica, it's the public affair. So the idea that every, it's male citizen has a stake in the affairs of the running of the city. And the ideal essentially is that the Republic should give free rein to the talents of its people, and above all, their yearning for individual honour.
Yeah.
But that those yearnings for individual honour should be subordinated to the honour of the city itself and the Roman people as a collective. And so therefore there's a kind of ferocious series of constitutional checks and balances that are designed to stop essentially a citizen from becoming overmighty, from making himself the equivalent of a king. And so those would include the division of the king's powers, for instance, between elected officials called consuls, who are, there are two of them so that one can always keep an eye on the other. They only serve for 2 years. This is true of most of the lesser magistracies in the Republic as well. But it's also it's something that every individual citizen is raised up with a consciousness that kind of king is a dirty word. The word rex is a dirty word, and that properly your personal honour must be tied up with the honour of the collective. And this is a brilliantly effective system that enables Rome and the Romans to emerge essentially from being kind of bunch of cattle rustlers camped out on hills above marshes to, as you said, ruling the whole of the Mediterranean. The problem is with this, that the more powerful that Rome becomes, so the more opportunities there are for its individual citizens themselves to become powerful. And you end up in a situation where certain citizens at the absolute top of the tree of achievement are able to put the whole Republic in their shadow.
So this brings us to a question that we had from lots of listeners. Roy Neely, for example, and he says, what's so special about the Rubicon? So we're 49 BC, Caesar takes his troops across the Rubicon. Why is that? Because he's not the first overmighty individual, is he? Because you've had a civil war between two massive, titanic Roman figures a generation earlier, Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. And Sulla had also marched on Rome, hadn't he? So why is that different from Caesar?
It's a good question. Essentially, so Roman history in the 1st century BC is kind of structured around the personal rivalry of kind of charismatic populists and people who tend to identify themselves with the traditions.
So it's this podcast.
The inherited.
It's the balance of this podcast,
Yes,
Tom.
it is, if you like. You are the charismatic populist, and I'm the chilly, stiff, cold traditionalist.
I wasn't going to say that. I absolutely wasn't going to say that. I'm sure I definitely thought of it the other way around.
So the last of these obviously is Mark Antony against Octavian, who becomes Augustus. Then you've got Julius Caesar, who's an absolute classic populist, against Pompey, who's also a populist but ends up fighting for the kind of senatorial elite. And then right at the beginning, you have as you say, these two figures, Marius and Sulla. And Marius is a populist. He's a great general. He's not aristocratic. The key thing that he does is that he faces up to the fact that the kind of the traditional days where so a legion. What does a legion mean? A legion basically is a levy. And the idea is that a legio, a levy, is simply the Roman people in arms. And so everyone has heard of centurions. Centurions command centuries. But centuries are also the voting blocks within the Republic. So there's this idea that the army camp is simply a mirror of the forum. The Campus Martius, the plain of Mars. You march out there and you get enrolled in the army, and then you go off and fight. Then you come back and you resume civilian life. And this, for centuries, has been the way that it should organize. The problem is, again, that Rome has become too powerful, that now if you're being enrolled in a legion, you're being sent to serve in Spain or in Syria or whatever. And so it's impractical to imagine that you can just come back. And so rather than having a single legio, a single levy, you start to get multiple levies, multiple legions. Yeah. And Marius basically professionalizes it. And he says that it's unfair to expect, peasants or whatever to go off and not be paid for this service. And so he essentially this kind of idea of a citizen militia, which is what the legio had been, becomes what we now think of as the Roman legions. And these become professional entities. And this makes Marius very popular. And he becomes consul a record number of times. But this generates opposition and envy. And the most charismatic figure who is envious of him is this guy called Sulla, who is a kind of louche, hadn't had a great, he hadn't had a meteoric rise, kind of hung out with drag queens and pimps and, in the red light district and all that kind of stuff, but turns out to be a brilliantly successful general and in due course an absolutely ruthless political operator. And what happens is that there's a kind of war in the East that promises all kinds of loot. It's going to be easy pickings, and Sulla gets the command for that. There are complicated political shenanigans in Rome that means he gets stripped of that command. Sulla has the legions ready to go, and rather than accept this, he marches on Rome, and Marius is forced to flee.
So, if Sulla marches on Rome, isn't that a crossing of the Rubicon type moment?
Kind of, yes, it
is.
And
why don't we remember? Why doesn't anybody care about that? Or did they care at the time?
They did care massively. It was an absolutely seismic event.
Right.
A completely seismic event, and it was absolutely felt to be that. Sulla then goes off to the east. He wins his war. Meanwhile, in Rome, there's been not just a civil war, but a war of the Italians in rebellion against the Romans. Sulla comes back. He embroils himself in that. He crushes the Italians. He crushes his opponents in the civil war. He establishes himself as the absolute master of Rome. And he dusts down this antique office, which is a very, very ancient one in the Republic. When the Republic is in absolutely desperate straits, you can appoint a single man for a 6-month term. And the name of this office is dictator.
Yeah. So
Sulla is appointed dictator for more than 6 months because he has the army at his back. He is absolutely ruthless towards his opponents. He has a whole bunch of them massacred in the heart of Rome. He then puts the price on people's heads. He posts prescription lists in the forum. People are paid if they bring him his enemies' heads. And it's an absolute rule of terror. And he uses his position of power essentially to enshrine the senatorial elite back in their kind of traditional role as arbiters of the state. So the Senate it literally means a kind of assembly of old men, the elders, the betters, the Bonnie, they call themselves, the good guys. This is how they see themselves. And when Sulla does this, and the enemy, the people that he's targeting the populists. And so that's why there are kind of, so populares, and I think populist would be a legitimate way to describe it. The difference between them isn't so much about policy as it would be today, but about style.
Yeah.
And I think you absolutely see that's something that over the past few decades, the past few years, perhaps much more than when I wrote this, which was in the early kind of first years of the 21st century, that sense of how differences in style can kind of bleed into politics and generate incredible divisions seems much clearer. And one of the populists, and he's a very, very young at this point, is Julius Caesar. And he flees into exile. And for Caesar, that experience of, having to hide out in barns, of being hunted across Italy, of knowing that there are people who will be paid if they can get his head.
And is that because he's very young though, Tom?
He's
so
very, very young.
Why has he been identified as a target by Sulla?
Well, he's related by marriage. So he's married. His family have married into Maris's family. So he's very much on the kind of the Marian side. He's very much on the populist side, and he identifies with that kind of side in this terrible schism. He survives it. Sulla and Caesar will express astonishment at this later in his career. Sulla lays down his powers. He retires to the Bay of Naples. He's basically he's recalibrated the Republic, the functioning, the plumbing of the Republic, so that basically his guys, his class of person will be in power.
And then he retires.
But he then lays it down. So Caesar is able to come back to Rome and to resume his career. But I think it has the impact that has on Caesar is that he's offended as an enthusiast for the Republican ideal of citizenship, that anyone could have done what Sulla did.
He's offended.
He's appalled by it.
The irony.
So right the
that
way
he of
through
all people is.
Yeah. So right the way through his career, Caesar will be renowned for his clementia, his mercy. And there's something aristocratic about that. It's humiliating for a Roman to be shown clementia by another citizen. But there is another way of seeing that, which is that it's an expression of Caesar's feeling that there should properly be a kind of civic commonality. Yeah. And that to offend against that ultimately is to offend against the deepest ideals of the Roman Republic.
So he thinks that politics has limits, basically.
I think so, yes. I think so. I mean, he's a very, very, very complex figure. But I think that you could say that through his career, he's motivated by two great ideals. One is that his own genius should have free reign. And that's a crucial part of it. He absolutely feels that no limits should be set on his ability to achieve great things, both for himself, but also for Rome. But he does also have an incredibly strong sense of loyalty towards those of his fellow citizens who back him. And that, in due course, is why he will become a great military leader and why he will win the love of his soldiers.
So that sets up who Julius Caesar was, and we will crack on with the story, Tom Holland, after a very quick break in which advertisers will promote Roman-themed goods. See you in a minute.
This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money.
Tom, we often talk about how to organise our finances. I'm very conscious that I'm paying for a lot of mad subscriptions. And there's one thing that we've talked about often on this show. It's the thing that we probably hate more than any other, and it's a hidden fee. I would love to get my finances under control. There are all these things piling up on our bank statements, and I think I need to fix this problem. I need to sort this out and to stop this.
I mean, my finances are so chaotic that I need this app.
So I'll tell you what it is. It's called Rocket Money. It's a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and it helps to lower your bills so that you can grow your savings.
With Rocket Money, you can track all of your subscriptions and you can easily cancel within the app with just a few taps, saving you time, avoiding charges. And you can also set budgets and goals and get personalized insights and regular reports to track how you're doing. They will even send you real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, refunds, and even low balance balances. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/ishistory.
That's rocketmoney.com/ishistory. rocketmoney.com/ishistory. Welcome back to The Rest is History. Now, I don't know about you, but I was delighted with the haul that Father Christmas brought to our household. And chief among the things that he brought was a board game for my son called Herd Mentality. And the reason I really enjoy playing that board game is because so much of my time I spend on the internet reading a publication that pushes back against herd mentality. Tom Holland, do you know what that publication is?
Would it be unheard.com, UNHERD?
UNHERD, exactly. And they very much encourage independent thinking. They've got an excellent article at the moment, I understand, by somebody called Peter Franklin. He's got an article. Do you know what the title is?
No.
It's Restorations Always Fail. Whether it's old Labour, the monarchy, or America after Trump, history shows that there is no going back. Very apt, Tom, for a podcast about the fall of the Roman Republic, don't you think?
Is there a reference, perhaps, to Roman Republican history?
He says, while firmly restoring the old order, Sulla made a mistake. He allowed the son-in-law of Cinna, the defeated populist leader, to escape with his life. The name of that young man?
Albert Einstein.
Diana Spencer. No, Gaius Julius Caesar. Yeah. The lesson here, says Peter Franklin, is simple. Just because you defeated one populist, it doesn't mean that another, more capable one isn't waiting for you down the line. Who's he thinking of, do you reckon?
No idea.
Donald J. Trump, I reckon.
Oh, goodness.
You don't think so?
Well, that's a chilling thought. Well, again, I wouldn't. Yes, I think it's harsh on Caesar to compare him to Trump, but we've already discussed that. But it's an excellent point and an excellent illusion.
Well, for excellent points and illusions, you should go to unheard.com more often, I think. Yeah,
and isn't it wonderful that 2,000 years and more after Caesar's assassination, he's still being mentioned in online publications.
Yes,
that push back against herd mentality.
And what Caesar was, of course, you will know, Caesar was in debt, wasn't he, in his career? So financial prudence mattered to him enormously.
Yes, it did.
So he would have been very keen on special offers. And unheard.
Do you know? I don't think he would. No,
he would have my brilliant link.
No, he would have rejected that offer because he would have probably spent double. He would have paid more for it. But for most people who aren't Julius Caesar.
Yeah, what a fool.
Dominic, you're about to say there's a splendid offer, isn't there?
There is. There's a splendid offer for Rest is History listeners. So don't be like Julius Caesar.
No, don't.
Go to unheard.com/rest. That's UNHERD. And you'll get your first 3-month subscription free.
Because I think the moral of this podcast, if it has a moral, is having people like Julius Caesar around isn't always good news.
It's very bad news. Yeah.
So save the Republic. Take up this special offer.
Welcome back to The Rest is History. Now, Tom, before we get back to Julius Caesar, can we just paint in a little bit more of the sort of surrounding picture? Sulla retires.
Yeah.
And then Rome doesn't slip fully into dictatorship, does it? They basically go back to the old system. It's weakened, but they carry on as though it hadn't happened. And the big new sort of the wunderkind, the young meteor, is Pompey. Who's the sort of baby-faced, ruthless...
Teenage butcher, he's called.
Teenage butcher, you called him that, didn't you? Or was that...
Well, that's the name that he's given.
So he'd been one of Sulla's hitmen, basically, had he? Is that fair?
Yeah, so he's a kind of a local bigwig in eastern Italy, and he raises a private army, as does also another... big hitter called Crassus.
Yeah.
And Pompey and Crassus both have meteoric careers in the wake of Sulla.
So they're kind of Sulla's boys, basically.
They're Sulla's boys. And basically, Sulla has weighted it so that people who backed him are kind of in pole position to win advancement. Most of them do it in the traditional way, going up through the magistracies. Crassus does it by... He becomes incredibly wealthy. So one of his wheezes is that he employs Rome's only fire service. And he will then he'll kind of wait for buildings to be on fire and then charge the kind of hapless people money to put it out, and he'll then buy it up and build new blocks of flats everywhere.
That's very, dare I say, it's quite Trumpian behaviour. It's
very, very Trumpian. But Crassus is a much kind of chillier, more controlled, more ruthless, more intelligent figure than say Trump.
Okay.
Pompey is, so he models himself on Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
He has the quiff of Alexander the Great. He ends up sourcing what he claims is the cloak of Alexander the Great. Obviously, some guy in some Eastern bazaar has flogged it to him. And Alexander the Great is a kind of very ambivalent figure in Rome because he's a king, and he's a conqueror, and he's seen as being a tyrant. So Pompey's identification with him isn't entirely positive, and it's reflective of the fact that there are very kind of strict age thresholds in the Republic for when you can hold a magistracy. So most of the Romans absolutely adore middle age. So you become 40, you can run for consul. So it's great. I mean, we become 40 and it's, oh God, I'm middle-aged. I'm so depressed, midlife crisis, get a motorbike. They go, brilliant. Now I can run for the consulship, which is why if you look at the portrait busts of Romans from the Republican era, they all look incredibly old, kind of crow's feet and baggy eyes and all that kind of stuff. But Pompey ignores that, and he just kind of gets as many commands as he can. And he ends up, through a kind of complicated process, being given command of basically the whole of the East. And the East is an absolute mess. The Romans haven't wanted to run it. Equally, they haven't wanted to allow anyone any of the kind of local kings or rulers to have any position of authority. So basically, it's all just collapsed into anarchy. So Pompey goes over there and he conquers the whole lot. And when he comes back to Rome, he brings kings in his wake. He's stupefyingly rich. He's got all the plunder of the East. He has this incredible triumph where in his triumph, they carry an enormous kind of bust of him complete with quiff, entirely modelled out of pearls. And it's kind of borne aloft so that everyone can see it. And this is magnificent, splendid. He's the hero of the hour. It redounds gloriously to the reputation of Rome, but it's also deeply, deeply offensive to people who see themselves as his peers. And one person who really detests it is Crassus, who has always been Pompey's great rival. So Pompey and Crassus, for instance, between them suppressed the rebellion of Spartacus, the great slave revolt.
Yeah.
Actually, it was Crassus who did it, but Pompey turns up and nicks the glory, which is kind of, he's a glory hogger. So Pompey finds, to his fury and disappointment, that even though he's by far the richest, he's got this wealth, he's got this power, he's conquered half the East, people who he views as kind of worthless political schemers are getting together and are frustrating what he wants to do. And basically what he wants to do is he wants to provide land for his veterans, and he wants the settlement of the East to be ratified.
Yeah. And
his enemies in the Senate refuse to do this. And this is classically how the Republic has functioned, is that if you are high achieving, then your enemies will gang up and form a consortium and kind of block you out. So Pompey is in a mess. And so he looks around for allies, and he comes up with two allies. One of them is astonishing. One of them is Crassus.
So his arch enemy.
His arch enemy. But Crassus basically decides that the pleasure of hating Pompey has to come second to his own ambition.
Yeah.
So Crassus always puts ambition first.
So do you know what this is, Tom? What? This is 1997. It is John Redwood and Ken Clarke teaming up in the Tory leadership contest.
That's exactly what
against William Hague.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I know it's a very niche reference, but about 2 listeners will be pleased by that.
No, that's exactly what it is. But they basically what Crassus and Pompey are both going to do is essentially a kind of criminal operation to force through the measures that they both want that can only be done in a criminal way. And to do that, they need a consul who will force through the measures.
A sort of tame consul, basically.
Well, kind of a tame consul, but a consul who is willing to to put up with the opprobrium that acting as their kind of agent will bring. And there's an obvious person, and that
Who is it?
Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar has, compared to Crassus and Pompey, had a much less kind of successful career. He again has gone through the hoops. He's gone up the steps. There's a famous story that Caesar is in Spain, and he goes to a temple and sees a statue of Alexander and weeps that Alexander had conquered the world and he has done nothing.
He should have read my book. He should have read my
he should have
book.
done. He didn't. That inspiring last paragraph.
Yeah.
So Caesar is very, very ambitious. He's very, very able. He's very, very popular. He's spent enormous amounts of money that he doesn't have on basically making himself he's the first person to stage gladiators dressed entirely in silver armor, for instance. These are despite the fact he's no money at all.
He's a kind of political showman. That's what he is.
Yes.
So is this to use another absolutely ridiculous modern comparison? Is he sort of slightly Boris Johnson in his "Have I got news for you"?
Yes, I think. Again, obviously, any comparison with Julius Caesar and any political figure on the current British stage would be ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
But
he's a joke. He's not. Well, he's not a joke.
He's not a joke. He's not a joke. So that's
he's
the
a crowd pleaser.
That's the difference. He's seen as being dangerous. So Sulla.
Yeah.
People had gone to him and said, "Look, pardon, Caesar." And Sulla had said, "There are a lot of Mariuses in that young man."
Okay, so people knew he was substantial.
So Sulla had seen that he was very, very able, and actually he describes him as loosely belted. So Caesar wears his toga in a fashionably loose belted way, and he's a dandy. He does spectacular kind of He borrows enormous amounts of money to build a villa. He then decides he doesn't like the villa, so he has the villa pulled down. And this is the kind of stunt that appalls lots of senators, but equally it kind of appeals to lots of voters as well.
Well, when we did when we started our podcast, Tom, we had an episode. One of the very first episodes we did was about parallels. We were talking about Donald Trump in historical context, and you compared him to. I mean, the title of the podcast was "Is Trump Caesar or wasn't it Is Trump Caesar or Nixon or something?" And you had this
something like that, wasn't it?
Thing about the Romans having this Roman politics having this role that people played, where they deliberately appalled the kind of the bien-pensant, the great and the good,
for fun, yes,
in order to win popularity with the crowds, and that's what Caesar's doing from the start, pretty much, is it?
Yes, so I think. I mean, I'm sure I mentioned this in that episode, but I'll do it again. I think the closest parallel to what the Boni, the kind of classic senatorial elite, the people who will loathe and detest Caesar throughout his career. If you think of John McCain's funeral, where all the presidents apart from Trump went, and Democrats and Republicans were joined there in the kind of the front row to mourn this great hero. And Trump's comment on McCain was he didn't like losers. He liked his war heroes not to be captured, which is an appalling thing to say, particularly since Trump had never served. But it was also kind of darkly funny that people did find funny, because the kind of the shock of offending traditional norms was. So Caesar was never. I mean, Caesar was a great. He was incredibly able. He will turn out to be one of the greatest generals of all time. Yeah. He's a man of incredible ability, but he does have a talent for grabbing attention, for winning the popular vote, that perhaps there's just a kind of a hint of that there. He runs for consul and he wins it by a kind of massive, massive majority. And of course he has a colleague, a guy called Bibulus, who is there to stand up for the interests of the Boni, the classic elite, but Caesar just elbows him aside. So people follow him around and empty buckets of shit over Bibulus's head.
Oh dear, poor
and they
Bibulus.
and when they try and oppose Caesar's measures that he's ramming through in favor of Pompey and Crassus, they get beaten up and they get forced out of the forum. And so people say that this is the consulship not of Caesar and Bibulus, but of Julius and Caesar.
But at this point, Tom, is he very much the third man in the triumvirate?
Yes, he is.
When it starts out.
Yeah.
And at that point, we had a couple of questions from people about Caesar and ambition. So Joshua D. Terry, for example, or Edouard Habsburg. a man who knows, given his surname, a little bit about imperial power and the winning and losing of it. So they're asking, is Caesar even at this stage? Does he have his eyes on the prize? Does he see himself as another Sulla, as a man who's going to wield supreme power? Or is he an opportunist, seizing chances as they come up? And, you know, is it premeditated
I think
or not?
At this stage, I think there are two things going on in Caesar's mind. I think one is, as I said, that he wants to do great things.
Yeah.
But he wants to do great things for the Republic, for Rome. And he is frankly frustrated by the little guys who are trying to block him from that. He has a consciousness of his own genius, and he wants the opportunity to fulfill that. I think also Caesar has looked at Pompey and has seen that basically, if you get a command, the opportunities for the opportunities that opens up to you will ultimately enable you to put the Republic in your shadow. Yeah. And Pompey is on a scale beyond everyone else. I mean, Pompey is criminal in his methods, but conformist in his ambitions. And so I think there's actually a question here from RP. Why did Pompey never do the equivalent of crossing the Rubicon when he was at the height of his powers? The reason he didn't do that was because ultimately he was in his heart a conservative. He'd trampled down convention to get to the top, but then having got to the top, what he really wanted was the approval of, you know, the senatorial elite. Pompey was a bit of a parvenu. He wanted to be accepted by them. Caesar didn't care about that. Caesar claimed a line of descent from Venus. He could trace his ancestry all the way back, you know, beyond the beginning of the Rome to Troy. So Caesar had no hang-ups about that, and he wanted that license because he felt that he deserved it, but also because he felt that if he was going to be a great man in the Republic, it was no longer enough just to be a consul. You had to have a record of military success behind you, which would bring you legions who would be devoted to you. It would bring you the wealth that you could then spend on winning yourself popularity by kind of building, you know, spectacular architectural projects in Rome, or handing money out to the poor, or staging entertainments. And the only way to do that is for Caesar to get command. Now, one of the things that his enemies had done before he becomes consul is to say every consul, when he finishes his term of office, gets a kind of a posting. And they say, well, Caesar, as his posting, he can organize stuff in Italy. So basically, it's kind of, you know, he can be the head of the motorways agency or something like that.
Yeah.
And Caesar's not having any of that. So he basically, what Caesar does is he looks north, where there are various kind of provinces. One on the Cisalpine Gaul, on the Italian side of the Alps. The other Transalpine Gaul, which is a kind of the south of what's now France. And he says, I'll have those, please. And so he gets given those, and not just for 1 year, but for 5 years. And by getting that, he's in pole position to win himself the kind of power and authority and wealth and status that only Pompey has.
Okay, very good. So Caesar's career is going from strength to strength. The great kind of dramas and crises, the great showdown with Pompey, they all lie ahead of him. The stage is set, if you will. Not quite at the Rubicon, but we're getting there. And I think we should come back tomorrow to find out what happens next. Now, dear listener, if you can't wait that long, I hate to tell you, but members of the Rest is History Club can listen to the full episode already. And if you want to sign up, you go to restishistorypod.com. And if you don't, well, you only have to wait 24 hours because maybe not even 24 hours, because the rest of the story will be out tomorrow. So thank you very much, Tom Holland. And we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to The Rest is History. For bonus episodes, early access, ad-free listening, and access to our chat community, please sign up at restishistorypod.com. That's restishistorypod.com.